everybody, it's Wednesday and this is the Court of Public Opinion in session for another day. Peter Clayton's behind the camera. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Thank you for joining us. I meant to mention this yesterday. Can't remember whether I brought it up on Friday or not, but with sadness I saw that Bob Rogers had died at the great age of 97. One of the doyens of radio in Australia. A man who probably started the business of being a disc jockey. They were sort of very interesting, formative days of radio when he was, I think, only 14 back in 1942 when he started at 3KZ in Melbourne. But he worked at 4BH and he worked at 2CH in Sydney, 2SM, one of the original good guys, and of course at 2UE. A very, very successful man. Well, having spent something like 70, getting on for 80 years broadcasting in the broadcasting industries. Great, great tribute. I remember he came here to Adelaide. Something had happened, as it always does in broadcasting. You know, somebody pulls the rug out from underneath you or sacks you or doesn't like you or something. Anyway, he came here because he needed a gig, and he got a job at 5KA. I was doing mornings at 5DN. He was doing mornings at 5KA. And for some reason, people kind of thought we sounded alike. And in the business, you get motivated or, I won't say intimidated. Yes, it probably is intimidated because you're young and you're aspiring, and you see these people who have the position of a star in the world of broadcasting, and that's the thing that you want to be, and you look up to these people. I was looking up to John Laws more than I was looking up to Bob Rogers. But it's all a question of what attracts you, I suppose, in terms of style. Anyway, somehow they thought I sounded, or was trying to sound, like Bob Rogers. But I'd been here for so long and people weren't familiar with Bob, so they thought he was trying to sound like me, which is very weird. The advertiser, I think it was, had a sound-alike competition, and the idea was to find out what people thought, who people thought sounded more like Bob Rogers. Bob, the genuine article, came second. I came first. And to this day, I don't know whether it's a compliment or a sort of vaguely, thinly disguised insult. By that I mean, you must never try to copy somebody. I would never do that intentionally. You can't. Everyone is a one-off in this business. We're all original, one-offs. Don't ever try to be like somebody else. It's the best advice I've ever been given in broadcasting. Anyway, Bob, we'll miss you. You were a trailblazer and a pathfinder and an inspiration to so many. God bless you. And rest in peace. Food days. I don't know why people sort of come up with food days, but they do. This coming Friday, for example, is National Donut Day. Did you know that, Pete?
No, but I do like donuts.
I like donuts too. National Donut Day. What food do you think deserves a day? Well, it's probably a pizza day. Be surprised if there wasn't several. Anyway, you might like to ring me on Friday and tell me what day you think we should have.
Well, I might say a KFC day.
A KFC day. Not a Big Mac day.
No.
No, okay. Here's a fun fact. But I would have to ask why. But here's the fact. There are 15,000 people in the Home Affairs Department. 5,000 bureaucrats in direct control over our borders. How do they keep our borders safe, I wonder, from the comfort and the environs of Canberra? The answer clearly is they don't. They don't. A disgrace. A disgraceful example of bureaucratic nonsense. And since Labor came to power, I don't think the media will make a big thing of it, but the public service has grown by 36,000 people. 36,000 people, without exception. This has added $24 billion to the national debt, or the national cost of living, or whatever you want to call it. Why? Does anyone sort of pull them up and say, hey, could you justify 36,000 new public servants in less than 3 years? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? And why are we paying for it? Oh, well, here's if we want to get stuck into Canberra nonsense, Minister for Immigration, Andrew Giles, cannot and should not survive. Oh yes, the Prime Minister will try and tough it out. Keep in mind, of course, that Andrew Giles and Anthony Albanese are factional allies. They're from, both of them, from the socialist left. So they will stick together. That's the way it works. 30 visas had to be cancelled just last week. Do you think they would have been cancelled if this Direction 99 had not been exposed? I hope there will be journalists who will call these people out for acts of incompetence. This guy is weak. You only have to watch him on his feet in the House. The minister, disgrace is the word that comes to mind. I think he's a disgrace. I think he should be sacked. We are now to believe that Directive 99 is going to be replaced with a directive that will more blatantly consider only what is in the interests of Australia. Well, would there be any other priority? Huh? Who thought it was a good idea to look after the interests of rapists and murderers and paedophiles and criminals? And could we extend this newfound sense of responsibility and priority to other areas as well? If we don't have to consider foreign interests or the rest of the world, we don't have to fix problems for the rest of the world, let's fix our energy problems. If we're not responsible or going to worry about the rest of the world, let's fire up our reliable coal-fired power stations and stop this expensive net zero nonsense, for God's sake. Australia, 1.3% of emissions. And speaking of emissions, the Iceland volcanic eruption, something else we mentioned on Friday last week, the pictures on television were amazing of the red-hot molten lava coming out of the ground. This is the 8th eruption since 2021, the 5th since December. Now, you'll never hear the flat earthers or the climate people say this, but Iceland has pumped into the atmosphere in 5 months more pollution, or as Professor Plimer says, he picked me up on it on Friday, he said, it's not pollution, it's plant food. I said, yes, sir. You know, that man, Professor Plimer, he has got more intelligence and brains than the front bench of both the Liberal and the Labor Party put together. I am so privileged to have him with me most Fridays. But the point I was making was that in 5 months, the eruptions in Iceland have produced either pollution or plant food more than Australia has produced in the last 20 years. In 5 months. But of course, not a word about that. Not a word. David Koch, who is a favourite South Australian, favourite South Australian son, has been made the Tourism Commissioner. The South Australian Tourism Commissioner. Why? Why? Look, I like David. I worked with David at 2GB, and that was before he started at Channel 7 with the Sunrise Show. He was doing I was doing mornings, he was doing breakfast. But this clearly is not right, this Tourism Commissioner thing. It doesn't matter how you gild the lily. We need to promote and reward local people. David has voted with his feet. Having left day-to-day television, he could have moved straight back to Adelaide, where he is, of course, the chairman of the Port Adelaide Football Club. The Premier just should stop and think. How does this look? Or has he totally confused good judgment with arrogance? The guy, David, is a presenter, a frontman. David Koch, a good one. He's a financial journalist. What this job calls for is marketing nous, marketing flair, maybe even marketing genius, management skills. The most potent message to come out of this decision: the Tourism Commissioner must live in the state he or she is promoting. Anything else is a joke. And Premier, I don't think you can tough this out, but I have no doubt you'll try. 30 years ago, Nelson Mandela won a historic election in South Africa. The African National Congress, once a terrorist organisation, was overwhelmingly elected the South African government. And then came years of corruption and economic mismanagement, which have left the country in a shambles. And the ANC, now unable to win an election in its own right, got around 40% of the popular vote. It took people 30 years to wake up, and God knows what it cost them. South Africa was a very, very wealthy country. Not anymore. Like Zimbabwe. You know, Rhodesia, once the breadbasket of Africa, so wealthy. Totally, absolutely broke today. But I don't know. I don't know where the African National Congress will go. They'll probably try to cobble together some sort of coalition. Every country in Africa can say that it rid itself of colonialism. Because lots of people were there, the Dutch were there, the Germans, the English, the French, you know, lots and lots of people were there. But they rid themselves of colonialism and embraced poverty, corruption, and hopelessness. On top of that, violence and lawlessness. I cannot think of a country in Africa that has succeeded or, with independence, has achieved anything. Now, I do want to remind everyone that tomorrow will be the 6th of June, the 80th anniversary of, in World War II, D-Day. It was supposed to be, I think, the 5th, and changes had to be made because of the weather. And right up until the 6th, Dwight Eisenhower was thinking about whether or not the weather would allow D-Day to occur. The Normandy landings. The Allied mission to liberate Western Europe from Nazi occupation. While the majority of Australians were engaged in the war with Japan, Australia did play a small but very important part in D-Day that I didn't know about until I was reminded. not only D-Day, but the many battles that followed. And there were many Australians who fought alongside the Americans, the British, the Canadians, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Dutch, French, New Zealand, Norwegian, Polish, even I think Rhodesian forces. Approximately 3,200 Australians were in the D-Day landings. 3,200. Some 2,800 served in transport. That was, that covered a lot of area. A lot of areas, like for example, they towed gliders filled with paratroopers. They crash landed these gliders along the French coast. They had to get behind the lines. Transport, towing, fighter and bomber squadrons with the Royal Australian Air Force and of course the Royal Air Force. Around 500 served in the Royal Navy warships, torpedo and landing craft. About a dozen soldiers served on the ground with the British Army on the very day. Thousands more Australians served during the Normandy campaign and beyond. At least 14 Australians, I understand, are known to have been killed on the day itself. Hundreds more were killed over the course of the whole campaign, the whole Normandy campaign. Lest we forget. But I tell you what, we had better not forget. How much time have we got, Pete?
You got time.
The Greens in Victoria, of course, they won't be thinking about D-Day or the courage and valour of Australian soldiers, men and women. The Greens in Victoria will introduce a bill to control supermarket prices. Now, on the surface of it, that sounds like a good idea, you know. The Essential Services Commission. There's already an Essential Services Commission. It would watch over and control the movement of prices. Now, when you think about it though, these people are so left of Labor, they are absolutely dangerously naive. No life or commercial experience, but they have the levers and the controls. You know, the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, well, basically because it doesn't deserve to exist anymore, but this is exactly the thinking that they were involved in. Great in theory, but it simply didn't work in practice. Prices were low in the supermarkets, or the Russian equivalent to a supermarket. Prices were low, but the problem, you know what the problem was? There was nothing on the shelves. Nothing to buy. And while the Labor government introduces in Victoria all sorts of really weird, far left thinking, this has got to take the cake. The first parliamentary secretary for men's behaviour change. They're going to have a parliamentary secretary, paid for, with staff, in charge of changing men's behaviour. Oh my God. Dear oh dear. I'll leave it there and I'll just mention a few dates if I may. Happy birthday if you're having a birthday or wedding anniversary. I'm still a bit croaky, but thank you for bearing with me. June 5. Oh yeah, 1949 on this day, Enid Blyton's wooden toy character, Noddy, first appears in the Sunday Graphic. Happy birthday to Noddy. Noddy and big ears. What was that line that you'd never be allowed to get away with today? Noddy woke up one morning feeling a little queer. Because all these politically correct people jump on essentially the most innocent, childish language, childhood language, and ban it. Oh, you can't say that. This is a little segment here which specialises in those things that they will tell us, you can't say that. Yes, we can. 1944, after receiving favourable weather reports, General Eisenhower decides to proceed with the D-Day invasion on the following day, which was June 6. Palestinian. See, they do get a bit of bad press, the Palestinians. Palestinian Sirhan assassinates Robert F. Kennedy, shooting him 3 times and wounding 5 others at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California. Kennedy dies the next day. This was the day, 1968 was the year. Emily Seebohm, Australian swimmer, 3 Olympic golds, born in Adelaide, 1992. 1937, on this day, Henry Ford initiates a 32-hour work week. Same day, 1940, a synthetic rubber tyre is exhibited for the first time in Akron, Ohio by the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. Kathleen Kennedy, American film producer. She produced E.T., The Extraterrestrial, Jurassic Park, president of Lucasfilms as well. Born in Berkeley, California, 1953. George Harrison releases Somewhere in England, his 9th studio album. Includes John Lennon's tribute All Those Years Ago, featuring Paul and Ringo as well. That was 1981. Australian woman Kathleen Folbig is pardoned after 20 years in prison for the murder of her 4 children. I remember this. After new genetic research found evidence of a gene disorder that had, in actual fact, most likely killed the children. You know? Terrible, terrible miscarriage of justice. She'd been in jail for 20 years for something she did. Can you imagine what that could be like? Terrible, terrible, terrible. American pop singer Mariah Carey, 24, weds Sony Music CEO Tommy Mottola. He was 43. St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. They divorce in 98. I don't know why people get married. You know, it'd be better to take a sort of a 12-month lease, wouldn't it? Lend-lease or something. I don't know. Kay Cotty sails into Sydney as the first woman to circle the globe alone in her boat. What was the name of Kay Cotty's boat? We talked to her several times. She was a very nice guest to have on the show, Kay Cotty. 1988. Ken Follett, I've spoken to him too. Welsh spy author. Eye of the Needle. Lie Down with Lions. Born in Cardiff, Wales in 1949. Happy birthday. And as I say to you, happy birthday or happy wedding anniversary. Have a lovely what's left of the week. Thank you for viewing The Court of Public Opinion. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter Clayton and I will be back next week on Facebook on Tuesday and Wednesday, and podcasting as well. Thanks to Andy Martin. And of course our live streaming show come Friday, 9 o'clock till 12, around the dining room table, jeremycordeaux.com. Have a great week. Believe in yourself, and goodbye for now.